services in there. If you'll just give me a moment. So, some of the great parts about this are the guided tours, the walkthrough on incident management, change management, and just the welcome walkthrough. These are very, very handy. Okay, let's jump into our actual, where are we here? I'm going to jump in here and we'll go straight through to our task for today. So, we've talked about the service desk and we've gone through service desk. Because of the nature of where we are, it's very difficult to do our role play. Just a quick note, can I just make sure everybody has, please pop their student number and name into the text button today, because I do need to record those for us as we go forward. So, having a look at problem management, what I really want to do today is have a look at this Bank of Queensland issue. Now, I'm going to put it on my screen. And the reason I'm putting it on mine is that you'll see that I have a subscription to Bank of Queensland, so it's very easy to get to. But if you can go through and have a look at that case, we're going to actually run it through from a problem management perspective. Thank you, everyone, popping that in there. So I'd like you to open up those issues, and I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a look, have a read of that website. I'll scroll through it on the screen as well. And what I'd really like to do is scroll through and see what you think of using your problem management tools. Outline the problem, the root cause, and the workaround, and any changes to configuration items that would have taken place as part of our change management process. Now, this actually occurred, so this is a real live test case. So I'm going to give you a few minutes. I'm going to make this appear double screen, and that will help us a little there in our reading. So first of all, I'd like you to go through and have a look, and then using the knowledge, I want you to spend 10 minutes outlining the problem, the root cause, and the workaround, if any, to any of the configuration items. Once we get through this, we'll jump into our group work, and I will show you some examples of the SLA assignment. Go ahead.
Yeah, you. So you go.
Go ahead.
Okay, I go. I think the system just calculated the interest for some clients, and it was wrong, and they detected that 10 years later.
Yeah, up to 10 years later. Why did it calculate the interest rates incorrectly?
They mentioned that the package, the product was complex and
overly complex.
And there were too many manual processes.
Yep.
So probably was human error, and the system accepted that.
Yes, overly a manual process, too complex, and there were manual processes in the back there. And manual processes, this is where we move from the, if you think about it from the perspective of moving from the human to the machine areas, machines, yes, they make errors, but they make different types of errors, and humans make errors that they shouldn't make. And that's one of the worst parts of it. Humans make human errors. It's not something we can do much about, unfortunately. What was the workaround? What did they do to fix that problem?
Is that by the time the error was detected or when it happened?
After they've discovered it, what did they do to fix that problem?
I think they need to refund the clients that were harmed and also improve the process to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yes. So they reviewed the process and they refunded the money. And something else that's interesting in there is they blamed the old management. Something that I think is well worth having to think about. They blamed the old management, which is not unusual. Okay. If we move forward from there, if we think about the configuration items, can you name any of the configuration items that would have needed to have been changed? Or any suggestions?
Sorry, I didn't get it.
A configuration item. Everything in a CMDB is a configuration item. It's there to store them. So the software, even the data, the customer's details, the interest rates, the calculations on how much they owe, they're all items within the configuration database. So it is those items, the items that needed to be changed were a couple. If we think about it from a change management perspective, they needed to change the rates that they were charging to the customers. They needed to review their processes for how they stored that information and managed it, or their governance. And if you go back to ITIL at its core, ITIL provides a framework for governance. Now, ITIL is not in its own a pure governance tool, but it provides a framework for governance. That's oversight of doing the right thing.
Suppress all the errors? We have a global error handler that's like...
Can you say that again, Polly, please?
I think it was another person talking close to me. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, because in banks, I think they should have like audit process to make sure that all like calculations are right and the rates.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure why they didn't catch this error. I think they didn't do audit.
Well, you're right. They should have had more governance process. And referring back to 2004, if we just take a step back from ITIL, ITIL is reasonably new and it's a form of governance frameworks and management frameworks for fixing problems. And if we had applied the problem management framework over the top of it, it may have assisted. If you think about when they had their first notifications in, they discovered this themselves. So a client had most likely noticed the charge on their account that was not in line with their own expectations. They call up the service desk and say, I seem to have been charged too many fees or too much of an interest rate. The service desk goes, we'll check that for you and get back to you. They pass it down and they have a look and to see if there's any incidents there, and there would not have appeared to have been any incidents. Then that situation would be passed across to problem management because the client is not being charged the right amount. Problem management would go back and look at the event records, and they would probably start looking for a workaround to ensure that the client is being charged the right rate first. That is a workaround. But it's not a known error. I don't know the root cause. Then they go through and they do their assessment, and their assessment comes back and says, well, this is fundamentally a problem with our processes because we have bad data in there. So we need to do something to go through and look at all of our processes to see what the bad data is in our system so that we can move forward with it. The next process after that would be notifying all the clients and making the actual changes. Now, because it involves a large amount of money, that is one of those ones that it is very, very painful to review. Long-standing errors are painful to find. I have had cases where when I do an audit on a customer, I go through and look for the services they're paying for versus the service that they're getting and make sure that we test that it's actually a service. I've seen $36,000 worth of telecommunication costs over 6 years billed at $500 a month for a service that was turned on and turned off within the first month, and then no one discovered it for 6 years. They just kept paying the bill. Now, in this company, we did have a $25,000 a week month communications bill, so it was lost in that somewhat. But because the service was available and no one ever actually went through and said, I want to turn this off, it was billed and had to be paid. I've also found overcharges, and I once got, I think, in the realm of about $42,000 back from Telstra because they had been charging us for a service that we'd asked to be cancelled. Now, it took them almost a year to work it out, and because we had cancelled a service, we were supposed to pay huge penalties on that, on cancelling a long-term service contract. What they actually did do was they basically gave us a free ride and just wiped off the debt that we were going to have to argue. Sometimes working with large companies, it's cheaper for them to write off a debt than it is to actually pursue it. That's why if you're ever in some debt with a company, to get it off their books, it's sometimes worthwhile asking them to take 50%, 20%, 30% to just clear the debt off. I had someone offer me 10% on a debt that they owed me as my business. I said, no, I'd rather have the debt than the 10%, because it was only $100 they were offering me on a $1,000 debt. And I know if I hand that debt across to a debt collector, it'll come in at more like 60 or 70% when they eventually pay for it or go into bankruptcy. But I have no risk. So they offered me $100. I sold the debt off to a debt collector. They'll take about 30%. I'm okay with that. If I get any money back from it in the long term, that's great. If I don't, I don't. Okay, that was a good problem there. That's a very interesting one. Bank of Queensland they used their own problem management processes to identify and rectify the root cause and to rectify it with their clients. So much so through that the general manager actually came through and discussed it with them. Okay, now while I've got you all here as a class, what I'd like to do is briefly go through and just show you some what I call exemplars. This is my marking guide and where is my screen? Trouble is I've got my mouse over